The Breach is late Season 2 for context, hence nothing serious is going on around here. In fact, Phlox brings out a tribble to... It's funny because Phlox is a monster. Isn't there some scientific technique so the tribble wouldn't be fully conscious as it was consumed alive? Yes, I think I read about that in the New England Journal of Killjoys. Want to come over here? I'm feeding a puppy to a giant tarantula next.
I just came by to give you this transmission. It's from the Denobulan Science Academy. Marked urgent.
Oh, what does this one say? To Mr. Phlox, we are writing to remind you that your doctorate in the field of surgeryology from the Acme Diploma Company of Ferenginar does not allow you to represent yourself as a physician. Into the recycling bin like the rest of them. After the titles, we find out there's a whole bunch of Denobulan geologists who are in serious trouble down in some caves. The weird part is they don't seem to realize they're in trouble, like is usually the case. But this time you can understand because the problem is actually political. The government has been taken over by a regime that hates outsiders and has made clear that they all better piss off right now. So Enterprise is going to head to the planet, find the scientists, and take them someplace where they won't get themselves killed, which with this group is a pretty tall order. And they can't communicate with the scientists either, so Travis, Tucker, and Reed are going to go spelunking to get them out.
Waste disposal units.
What are these for?
We take out everything we bring in.
And like many episodes, once they've brought it back, they'll try to polish it. After the trio have departed, insert your own going where no man has gone before joke here, Enterprise picks up a distress signal from another ship in orbit that has a reactor problem, and they're not being allowed to return to repair it. They can apparently just hang in space and die there for all the locals care. So Enterprise shows up to help, which may be hard since the chief engineer is currently climbing through a tunnel while carrying his own crap. All the sick and injured are quickly brought aboard, with one in particular trouble because of the radiation he absorbed. Well, that is apparently the least of his problems.
There was an accident on your transport.
What's he doing here?
Yeah, you're not the first one to ask that question. The patient, Anantaran, refuses treatment because of the history between his people and the Denobulans. Archer doesn't accept that and wants Phlox to, if necessary, sedate the patient and treat him against his will, with the implication that this is the obvious course of action. Apparently there is no such thing as a DNR in Archer's world. Phlox points out that as a Denobulan he is not bound by human ethics, though much of the time he doesn't seem to be bound by any ethics. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have them, it's just Phlox views them in the same way that he views the serving size recommendations on a container of Ben & Jerry's. Oh yeah, 4 servings per container. Yeah, this will last me through the weekend and definitely not something that I'll binge on Friday night. Well, Archer is not pleased that Phlox is so unreasonable as not to sedate and treat a man against his will, so he flat out orders him to do it. And Phlox refuses. Uh-oh. Now what, Captain? What are you supposed to do? Relieve him of duty? This is the situation you have created for yourself, Archer. Take a good look at it. Your entire medical staff consists of one doctor who's a fucking zookeeper. You don't even have a first aid expert on hand for field medical duties, because if so, you wouldn't have to have your tactical officer and chief engineer learn how to spelunk from your helmsman and leave them with no possible first aid, except what Trip Catfish Tucker might have picked up from banging his head into things all the time. They're down there searching for people who have lost contact in a cave. They might need some help. And since 2 of the 3 are learning how to do this on the way, maybe, just maybe, the rescue team will be in need of some medical help. Did you think of that? Yeah, who could have seen that coming? Besides everyone. These 2 rubes are left dangling there like a dope on a rope, but eventually, while Travis is trying to hold 2 full-grown men so that they're not supported solely by his broken leg, They eventually manage to swing around until they can then reach one of the sheer walls and hook onto a crack. I can't help but think that this was inspired by the then recent idiot climbing movie called Vertical Limit, which was also about how everything you might bring is more of a hazard than a help. And that movie even included the black dude slides down the hill and breaks his leg on some rocks scene. That either makes it obvious, or this is a trope that I have never heard of. And by the way, speaking as someone whose idea of a climbing adventure is trying to change a ceiling light bulb, even I know that if you use existing safety equipment, never mind what's available centuries in the future, you are more likely to die driving to or from your cliff than you are trying to climb it. Since that is not tense, though, everybody in fiction climbs using equipment probably made during the First World War and cured at the bottom of a swamp for a century. Oh, and then coated in Vaseline just to make sure. Anyway, back on the Enterprise, Archer tries convincing the Antaran to undergo the treatment. But with the sheer size of the loss of life on their side, he won't. Apparently the Denobulans were guilty of war crimes.
You'd rather die.
I'm the first Antaran to even see a Denobulan in 6 generations.
If you spent some time with him, it might change your perception of them.
A few hours in our historical archives might change yours.
I prefer to make my judgments based on first-hand experience.
Now, if there were Vulcans, I could get behind you, pointy-eared freaks. Archer goes to ask Phlox about it, who says it's a bit complicated. It was not their proudest moment, but it was something they've tried to put behind them. Except in 300 years, neither side has tried to reconcile. They seemingly do their best to just avoid each other. This pending death is far worse than tragic. It's socially uncomfortable. Phlox doesn't think that there's anything that he can do to change this guy's mind, but Archer tells him to go in there and try, for crying out loud. But when Phlox looks the guy over, the response is just sarcasm, no matter what Phlox tries to do.
Why do you want to save my life?
I'm a doctor.
Do you believe that saving one Antaran will assuage your guilt for killing millions?
Hey, buddy, let's be reasonable here. Phlox did not go killing millions of people. He just allowed millions of people to die when he had the means to save them. The guy keeps acting like an asshole, just going on and on about how monstrous Phlox must be, until he's had enough, explodes at the guy for his rude behavior, and storms out. He heads to the mess hall to brood, lamenting this idiot to T'Pol, but he also mentions the time when he was young that his grandmother refused to let him go on a trip with his friends to a planet that she said the Antarans had tainted by their presence. Yeah, I'm sure we all have one of those relatives. Now, obviously, I don't mean the ones who make an honest effort but just can't keep things straight, whether it's colored people or people of color that they're not supposed to say, and they think they've dodged a bullet by calling Nelson Mandela an African American. Meanwhile, Reed and Tucker are crawling through a tunnel that has "I am the digestive tract of Cthulhu" written all over it. But it does finally lead to the Denobulan camp, who are about as welcoming as the xenophobes on the surface, actually. Tucker explains the situation to them, but the scientists refuse to leave, regardless of the consequences. They figure the Science Academy is just being overcautious, and even with the threats of imprisonment or execution, and judging by their behavior, I'm going to guess the overlords are going to go with option 2 for these geologists. They figure that the government changes hands so often that by the time they're finished, everything should be just fine again. Tucker makes clear to them that hanging around here for the better part of a month is really not an option, so grab your shit and get the hell out of here. Lord knows he's grabbed his own shit to get the hell out of there. They at first refuse, but when he threatens to literally drag them out, they see by the look on his face that not only will he do it, but probably begin by punching them in the face. Phlox goes to deal with the Antaran again. This time he decides, rather than just ignoring their history as he tried last time, he's going to present his own personal view on it. How the stories of his grandmother, who had lived through the war, she's an old bugger, gave him nightmares as a child. Phlox did not pass those stories on to his 5 kids, though, but instead tried to present as accurate a picture as possible of the conflict, warts and all. He's ashamed that, in spite of that, one of his sons fell in with a bad crowd and shared in their bigoted attitudes.
You wanted to know what my children would think if they were here now. I can tell you what Metis would think. He would be happy to have me grant your request and let you die. But that is not the example I tried to set for my children. Why not live? Set an example for yours.
Or you would. No chance now. That radiation has left you as impotent as Putin's ethics advisor. In a similar boat are Tucker and Reed, as the geologists keep stopping to grab more of the samples that they've stashed around here. They're like frickin' chipmunks. Tucker has to finally threaten to shoot one of them in the ass if he doesn't start moving. With a phase pistol, though. We don't want to get to Paul jealous. What finally convinces them, though, is a massive explosion that threatens to collapse the tube. They're being bombed. Seems the government started a little early. So Archer learns from the big cheese that apparently this regime change isn't exactly set in stone. Right now, they're shelling the opposing side, which happens to be in the vicinity of those caves. So Archer decides that he'll bomb the ones doing the bombing as a bit of karmic justice. And while the Grand Poobah tries to call Archer's bluff, he just can't risk it, and so agrees to hold back for now, which is good because the spelunkers need some time. Although they might be able to dodge rocks thanks to their spider sense. Back on the ship, the Antaran has reconsidered in light of Phlox's honesty and is going to undergo the treatment. Sure hope he doesn't die. That would be really embarrassing, wouldn't it? Speaking of which, the deadline has come and gone, so Archer decides he'll fly down there personally, because there's no way after his bluff that would end badly. Fortunately, before he can do such a damn fool thing, Tucker calls up to say that they're in the shuttle pod on their way back with the scientists, so it's all good. Except no, one of the locals starts shooting at them. Oh, nothing serious. It's just one final up yours before Enterprise leaves. They do tend to get that a lot, don't they? So the Antaran survives and is going to be heading back on the repaired transport, which has the 3 geologists on board. After all of Phlox's hard work, just a few days with those 3, and they're going to wind up starting the war all over again. Phlox closes this out by reaching out to his estranged son, the end. Post-episode follow-up? Annoying character goes to the geologists. They should have left them at the bottom of that shaft. Final score for The Breach is 6 out of 10. Compared to the rest of Enterprise, it manages to rise slightly with the serious approach that it took to a complicated matter, that it is the personal interaction that makes change really stick. But other than that, there's just a whole lot of meh in this episode. Between rock climbing, Misties will know what I mean about that, and, well, Archer being Archer. Still, for Season 2, it's not bad.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Joel, why are we watching this dull mountain climbing sequence?
Well, because it's there.
Oh.